Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
We believe climate change is the greatest investment opportunity of our generation. That's why the African Green Infrastructure Investment Bank, AFGIB, is investing for generational climate returns. Join Africa's Green Investment Bank and its partners for action on the just transition and emissions reduction targets in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt for an epic 2022 African COP27. The African Green Infrastructure Investment Bank, AFGIB, committing capital to a climate-safe future.
We will now be moving to the briefing segment, commencing with the first of two briefing announcements. The first briefing being the launch of the Model Law on Institutional Investor Public Partnership Initiatives and its preamble by Dr. Sharon Fitzgerald, who is the lead partner at the global law firm DLA Piper. By the way, DLA Piper is the official global legal services provider and partner for COP26. So we're in excellent hands. So the floor is yours, Sharon.
Thank you very much, Hubert. So just by way of background, as Hubert mentioned, I'm a partner at DLA Piper. I've been involved over a number of years in different forms of PPP projects. I've drafted legislation for PPPs and procurements. I've seen things that have worked well and things that haven't worked so well. But I think a key experience that I would share in terms of things that have worked well, and that has been when there has been true stakeholder engagement. And I very much look forward to being involved in the development of this model law and to be engaging further in that process of stakeholder engagement with you. So in terms of the model law and our preamble, we have 5 key objectives. These won't be the only things covered in the law, but these are the 5 key objectives, which I'll just mention briefly before going into some details. But we want this law to incentivize collaboration between institutional investors and the public sector. As Dr. Mayaki said earlier, what we need to have is innovation. And so innovation comes through collaboration. And what we need to ensure in the model law is that we regulate appropriately. As you will all be aware, if we have a system that is too stringent, then that could stifle the innovation and collaborative. But we do need to have some sort of system. We need to have something that is robust for the public sector to be comfortable in terms of the partners, private sector partners that they'll be working with, but also confidence from the institutional investor community that the investments that they'll be putting into programs will be investments which will be well spent. And another objective in the law is therefore the fact that any investment needs to be made in accordance with international best practice. But we will also, of course, be thinking of not just what would work, for example, in my jurisdiction, the UK, but just to be thinking what will work in Africa. And we will, of course, be thinking that there are many countries in Africa, each with different legislative regimes. So something that works in one country in Africa may not work elsewhere. So we need to be featuring best practice, but also flexible. Key thing that we've heard in the keynote speeches is the requirement for there to be investment at speed. And very often we've all seen wonderful projects which don't go ahead ultimately because there has been some sort of hold up in the procurement process. So what we're looking to do in the model law is to build on experience and to fast track as far as possible the procurement processes which will be needed for the green projects that we were talking about. We also need another objective of the model law, which is to deliver both value for money for governments, but also recognised and bankable risk allocations. So often projects can go out with an unrealistic risk allocation in the contracts that can lead to either there being no competition because there is no private sector interest, or it could end up in there being a very long competition where both private and private partners thrash out through negotiation the contract terms. We'd like to, in this model law, try and cut through some of that and derive some principles where we can start with a risk allocation that is fair to all parties involved in the transaction. And then in terms of the final objective, it's not enough to be procuring and signing a contract. That contract needs to be efficiently managed. Again, from experience, projects can fail because there is a lack of management of the contract and the project itself. So in terms of what I've been mentioning, you might say, well, these are features in PPP laws around the world. So what's innovative about what we're talking about here? And what's innovative is that we're looking to target a particular type of project. And those are the green infrastructure investment programs and projects that have been mentioned in the keynote speeches. In terms of how we define those programs and projects, that will be a consequence of our stakeholder engagement. As we all know, PPP can take many different forms, contract models, sectors. So the important thing here will be to recognise through the law the programs and projects that will make a real difference in terms of climate change. The law will incentivise collaboration through different mechanisms in the law. One of those mechanisms is through embedding within the law the ability for public and private sector to engage upfront in terms of developing and prioritising projects. So priorities could be on the basis of strategic importance to the delivery of NDCs, SBTs and net zero. It could be the level of economic and social benefit that the projects might have. It might be the balancing of successful delivery of those projects and ensuring that there is appropriate risk transfer. So there will be the ability to have that upfront collaboration, which very often doesn't happen. What you will see is instead governments going out with a programme, various projects, but not having engaged with private sector and the institutional investor community. We're looking in the model law at the role of sovereign wealth funds and public pension funds and how we can develop their role in the public procurement of these partnership projects. So we're very keen to be engaging and just hearing the views from these bodies. As mentioned, we're looking at fast-tracking, streamlining the procurement process. And so in the model law, what we're proposing to institute is a series of panels which are set up on the basis of selection criteria, aligning with the partnership projects themselves and the skill sets which investors and developers should have in terms of these green projects. So by using panels, we will enable the public sector to be then engaging with those who are on the panels, and to be having either solicited competitions, so mini competitions, direct awards of the panel, or ability to receive unsolicited proposals from those on the panel. And the panels will be could be sector specific, country specific. They can be designed in whatever way works best, and this will be another part of our stakeholder engagement. But these will be open panels, so it will be possible for new parties to join the panels at any time. Equally, if a party doesn't fulfill the criteria that are required for the panel, then they would be removed from the panel. There will be criteria will include probity criteria such as sanctions, dealing with sanctions concerns, fraud and corruption, money laundering, terrorist financing. So it will ensure that not only are those in the panel qualified in terms of what the types of project that are coming up, but that they have the correct corporate credentials in terms of being on the panel. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, what we are looking to target in this model law is focus on bankable risk allocation from the outset. And that will be delivered through working in stakeholder engagement to design a contract model that recognises that there are differences in the risk allocation that are required in order to facilitate the investment that we're talking about. So in terms of doing all of that, it's all very well to come up with a new idea, but what we do, we must ensure that the model law is robust. So as mentioned, we need to be considering the risk of fraud and corruption. Also, we need to ensure that the model law deals with transparency and reporting. We do also need to consider governance, and that would be from both a public and private sector perspective. This isn't about fast-tracking private sector investment into projects only. It's in ensuring that both private sector and public sector are comfortable in the governance arrangements that are put in place in respect of the different projects that are coming through. We need to consider the interface with existing laws. So there will be in many countries existing PPP laws and procurement laws, and so it may be that the model law doesn't need to completely remove application of these legislations, that it may be that small adjustments are required. So again, this would all be dealt with in the context of the model law, but also the guidance note that will accompany it. Key factor is that in terms of what we do here in development of the model law is ensuring that we have knowledge transfer. It's all very well to develop a new law, but everyone needs to know how to use that new law and how to structure the contracts which will be signed pursuant to the new law. And finally, whatever we do, we must ensure that we are delivering or facilitating the delivery of quality projects. Speed is important, but we need to make sure that what is built, what is delivered, fulfills a function that it was designed for in terms of addressing climate change issues. So in terms of methodology and next steps, as mentioned, this is the first step in our journey of stakeholder engagement. We will be holding other events like this. We daily have offices in Johannesburg, Casablanca, and Nairobi, for example, as well as a number of other offices in Africa. So it will be important to be engaging with both public and private parties, just to be talking about the particular challenges that need to be addressed in the model law. There will be some technical issues that we will need to look at. As mentioned, it's that balance of the laws that are already there versus this model law. How does that need to work? But just looking at the potential blockers to the model law. So for each jurisdiction, those blockers could be different. It could be to do with the time that it might take to implement a new law. It might be to do with other regulations that take primacy over this model law. So we will need to identify and then work through these issues. Part of the stakeholder engagement, we'll be looking at understanding lessons learned from other jurisdictions, and carrying out a comparative review of examples in the world where an institutional investor model has been successful. But above all else, as I said at the outset, what needs to be clear in the model law is that it's a tailored law, and it's something that would work from a practical perspective in the individual jurisdictions in Africa. And then throughout the drafting process, we would propose it's not just a case of speaking with stakeholders at the beginning, but it's in taking stakeholders along with us in the journey of developing the model law. And as we have a draft, then sharing and engaging with stakeholders in terms of what that draft might look like. And then finally, what we would really like to do is to identify and deliver some Pathfinder projects which are in line with the objectives of the law and can assist us with the development of the model law. As we know, sometimes it just takes running something in reality and practice to actually iron out any wrinkles in terms of what's been proposed, to learn from the good bits as well as the bad bits. So we'd be very interested in hearing from you on this call if there are any Pathfinder projects that you think we could actually use as examples where we can actually not just at COP27 report on a model law, but report on projects which have stress tested that model law.
We believe climate change is the greatest investment opportunity of our generation. That's why the African Green Infrastructure Investment Bank, AFGIB, is investing for generational climate returns. Join Africa's Green Investment Bank and its partners for action on the just transition and emissions reduction targets in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt for an epic 2022 African COP27. The African Green Infrastructure Investment Bank, AFGIB, committing capital to a climate-safe future.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.